in the 60s, Michel Projet wrote that a bureaucratic organization is an organization that cannot correct its behavior by learning from its error. That's, oh my God. That's,
Is that the definition of insanity?
yeah, almost. Well, it drives you insane, exactly. And it has nothing to do with the people working in it. It's a systemic character of a bureaucracy. It's really hard. And still we have to find ways to deal with change, to deal with innovation, to improve the public service, and especially us, as a new generation. And there was a book written by Mark Moore in the 90s. I don't know who of you know it. But his definition of why are people joining the public service is they create public value. If you're going to work for a corporation, you want to create private value, money. If you're joining the government, or if you're an NGO or a social entrepreneur in a way is the same, you're trying to create public value. And Mark Moore described that to create public values, you often need three things. And I think that you'll recognize in your work that in order to create that, you have to know what kind of public performance do I actually want to achieve. If there's no clarity about that, it's actually very hard to create that value. So a discussion on what is the public performance that I or my team or my organization is actually trying to achieve here. And then the second question that you need to answer is, so how do I organize the support and the authority to actually do that? And in a bureaucracy, in government, that question is crucial. If you don't have that support, if you don't have that authority, you are in trouble. And sometimes I've seen very risky civil servants that stick out their necks and do things without the authority. Sometimes that's needed. But to do it sustainable, you need to organize that. And the third question is about operational capacity. Because you can have a very clear goal, this is the public value I want to create, and I'm actually authorized to do it, but I don't have the operational capacity to deliver. So sort of that is the tension that many of us working in government feel in our work, between those three characters. And that's what I want to talk a bit. Who was born after January 8th, 1969? That's, I would say, a close majority. So, in my view, you are, and I'm as well, we're the transition generation. We're a generation that is transitioning towards the knowledge society. And that transition, and I want to explain a bit about how I see that transition going on, has consequences throughout the economy and society. And why did I choose the date January 8, 1969? That was the date that this picture was on the newspapers of most newspapers around the world. New York Times, Frankfurter Allgemeine, Le Monde. It was the first picture of Earth taken from the outside. It was the first time that humanity saw Earth from the moon. It inspired David Bowie to write the song Space Oddity with the line, planet Earth is blue and there's nothing I can do. And it also started the sustainability movement, because here we realized that basically if we mess it up with this blue marble, that's it. That's what we have, nothing more. And that realization on a global scale was there. And in a way, that was seeing the system and seeing the complexity, but also the vulnerability of it. And that year, 1969, was pretty crucial. So you saw this picture, and David Bowie writing the song, and in July, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. And that was another important year. A month later, our parents went to Woodstock, if you were here in the area, and they had a great festival there, the Summer of Love. But the real breakthrough was on 22nd of October, on 10:15 in the evening. Because on that evening, in the laboratorium of Professor Leonard Kleinrock, the internet was born. It was the first time that two computers were linked and there was sent a message from one computer to the other. So 1969 is sort of a really turnaround year for society, and for me it's sort of the starting year with technology, culture, political starting to change fundamentally. And I think there's a second important year, which is 1989, which saw 4th of June, Tiananmen Square, where we saw political systems collapse in China nearly. The release a couple of months later of Nelson Mandela. He was released actually beginning of 1990, but in 1989 the decision to release him was being made, and the president of South Africa met with him. And on November 4, the Berlin Wall fell. And basically, and in that same year, but a couple of months earlier, in March, the World Wide Web was born. And you see it, I think, in a way already back into some of those revolutions, like for instance the fall of the Berlin Wall, which was really an uprising of people. There was no really who was the leader of the revolution around the Berlin Wall. It was not really a leader, it was the collective. So in that time, we are going towards that knowledge society, where the basic economic resource is not longer capital or land or labor, but it's knowledge and it's innovation. And the consequences of that are felt, like I said, throughout economy and society. We see it with people who are better educated than ever before, and where your education is actually a large determined factor in your future well-being, more so than ever before. And we see technologies being spread across society and economy, having major, and above all, of course, the internet, having major consequences. And those consequences are being felt throughout society, with governments, with NGOs, schools and hospitals, but also through corporations and the labor market, the capital market. Just think of the financial crisis, which in a way was a financial sector that had a new technology to basically switch capital all over the world in milliseconds, but we forgot to change our systems, the checks and balances and the regulations around it. And that gave us, so that's, to me, a shock, one of the shock waves that we have from moving from this industrial society to a knowledge society. So there's all kinds of issues that are related to this transition. We see unemployment, we see new inequalities between people who are well educated, people who are lower educated, and that is translating into differences in income, differences in health, differences in housing. And how do we actually, I think that's a major question for especially people working in government, how do we deal with these new inequalities? How do we deal with the democratic crisis? Lots of people, and especially the people actually not well educated, that have lost trust in our public institutions. How do we restore that trust? How do we deal with globalization? How do we deal with innovation? Not just as government, but also as corporations. There are many headquarters of corporations that are really thinking deeply, how do we deal with markets where suddenly startups are disrupting the entire market, or where, look at what has happened in the music industry. Look what is happening in the car industry at the moment with electrical cars and Tesla doing it. So we see different markets being basically disrupted in front of our eyes. And what we in a way also see is sort of a systems failure. So many of the public systems that we've created, the education system, our energy system, our health system, are all in itself, they were great social innovation. And I think, and especially in Canada, I think you can be proud of your health system, for instance. It's a great innovation. But it's not longer basically, in terms of complexity, surfacing the need of society. And the question is, how can we change those systems so that they can actually deal with the complexity of the challenges at hand? And that's the question that we that we face, I think. And we do that in a time where if we then look at the problem-solving capacity, what is our capacity to solve these really complex problems? Like like the future of health, or the future of our education system, or climate change, or some of these inequalities. And we have to do that in a time that government, to be honest, is confronted with a decrease of their problem-solving capacity. There is less funding and less public resources. It's actually increasingly difficult for governments to attract and retain talent, and that's why I ask for this applause, because really the governments need young talent moving forward. And like I said, governments need to operate in a bureaucracy which is highly vertical, whereas we live in a world that is horizontal and that is networked. Now, if we move our attention towards society, on the other hand, we see that the problem-solving capacity in society is on a record high. So people are better educated and informed than ever before, and especially here in Canada. Just compare it with 50 or 100 years ago. And many of them want to be engaged and want to actually contribute to a better society, not just create private value, but many of us want to create public value. I was teaching social change at the Harvard Business School in December. It was like actually a very funny experience. That even the guys at Harvard Business School want to learn about social change. There's more private capital for social good than ever before. So we actually do not need to rely only on government money. And lots of people are actually innovating all kinds of ways to get that capital and invest that in solving social problems. And we have all kinds of technologies that enable us to collaborate and to perform really complex tasks to virtually no price. Look at how Wikipedia is being managed. It's about 12 people on staff that basically create a global encyclopedia that is alive. It's a living a community, and thousands of people contributed very easily. So the shift that we have to make, and I think especially the people who work in government and also the people who are elected, is to stop thinking that government will solve our problems. And that's very hard, because most politicians are basically chosen on the premise, give me your vote, I'll solve your problems. But it's not true anymore. And the question becomes, we definitely need government. I would never want to live in a country without a government. And the question is, how can we help government to start develop with society? How can we make use of the record high problem-solving capacity that is there in society, but in order to use that problem-solving capacity to its optimal extent and to really go to large scale, we probably need a government. And that's where this notion of public and social innovation labs, change labs, design labs, the word labs comes back, is I think coming, because they are sort of vehicles that help to connect large institutional organizations like the government with this vast amount of problem-solving capacity that is around in society, and how to collaborate around really complex challenges. And that, you could say, it started in Northern Europe, but it's now rapidly spreading across the globe. So that's fascinating. So what in terms is a lab for me? And there is many definitions out there, but I wanted to have a couple of words on that. So for me, a lab is not just a process or just a space. For me, foremost, a lab is a team of people that have certain tools, and those tools can come from design thinking, change management, social movement theory, collective impacts. There's a wide array of fields to help to create change in a multi-stakeholder environment. And sometimes a space can help, but it's definitely not the only thing that is out. And the value of a lab is I see sort of 4 values that these labs bring. And first of all, it's a committed but neutral convener. So this team of people is committed to the challenge, but not per se to the institution. They are on the hunt for new solutions, regardless of which institutions could actually deliver those solutions. And they are trusted to bring together different parts of society in one process or in one space. And the second value of a lab is that they work towards scale.